Many thanks for staying with us. We're being joined by our guest, Caleb Festus Okeke, and you'll be a broadcast journalist and an analyst to talk about recent update on Anambra gubernatorial election. Good morning, Mr. Caleb. Trust you can hear us clearly.
Yeah, of course I can hear you. Good morning to you and good morning, Nigerians.
Great. So I'm thinking we should just pick up from our last conversation on the same topic, right? Some
Yes.
national dailies report that a PDP candidate for Anambra's gubernatorial elections has actually started picking traction and momentum. So my question would be, what has changed since then, since the last time we had this conversation on this same show?
All right. Let me start with the the PDP candidate, and then I'll now go on because it is the same. I'll say that the analogy is the same for the entire process as well as we are now witnessing in Anambra State. You'll find that the PDP candidate had some issues where he was shot at by some people, and just like his recovery back now and joining back in the race, it appears that also other candidates have woken up. The last time we spoke, I told that it didn't look like there was anything at all, going on in Anambra State. It didn't look like an Anambra election that we know. In 2021, I recall how tough it was at the time with debates and all that. But the momentum picked up, just about the time after the recovery of the PDP candidates. And we've seen a lot of candidates making a lot of moves right now. Some of the very interesting issues, coming up, including the issue of rotation or zoning in Anambra State, because Anambra State has 3 senatorial districts, and the governorship has somehow, under a gentleman's agreement, under the ruling Progressive Grand Alliance (APGA), have been rotated between the north, the south, and the central. And right now, Governor Soludo, who is of the APGA political party, is from this Anambra South. And the interesting and most intriguing part of this election is that the Anambra South, under this arrangement, is deemed to have one more tenure before it moves now to the central. So one of the most interesting things is the arguments that the various candidates are bringing on, the candidates from the Anambra South anyway, in the major political parties are bringing up to say that they would like to do one term just to complete that, to honor that rotation in Anambra South. So there's been a lot of fireworks, including one of the candidates who went to High Court, to swear an affidavit. This is the first time I'm seeing that in Nigerian politics. A politician going to the court to swear an affidavit to uphold one term. I was also hoping that the politician would also add another affidavit to keep to his campaign promises. It is the kind of affidavit I would like to see going forward. But all in all, Anambra State November 8th journey, the journey to November 8th has become more lively than the last time we talked.
All right, there's also reports that there's a lot of community support, coming from Oka North for incumbent Governor Soludo. How do you think that has strengthened this campaign, and how do you think that would affect the overall outcome of the election?
Well, Governor Soludo is prime positioned to, he's the man to beat. Not only is he the candidate, he is also been the candidate that has appeared to want the re-election more. Other candidates have not put in the same energy in terms of reaching out to communities, just like you cited, not just in Oka North, I think also in Anambra East, in Anambra local government, and so many other places where before now the governor has not reached out. He's been doing a lot of reaching out to different communities. I believe that the death of the late state of Patrick Ifanyoba really affected the trajectory of this election. Because if you look at it, most of the candidates, yes, they are going around, yes, they are taking their messages to the communities, but the footprints are not as as notable as you'd expect them to be. But Soludo on that part, of course, he knows that the momentum of his co-contenders not, they're not making a lot of waves. I don't know what is responsible for it, but I think that most importantly is the wave of projects that the governor embarked on just about 9 months to this election. I think that communities are pinning, their hope on the fact that the governor has started some work and that probably he would need the time to complete it. And that's why most of the communities are looking like they're falling in line in terms of the rhetorics on the streets. Like I said the last time, if the election were to be today, I don't see any chances of the opposition parties claiming it. But a day is a long time in politics, and the election is still a few days shy of a month away. So it's left to be seen what the intrigues and what the strategy that the opposition parties will come on board with to be able to displace the certitude with which Governor Soludo is going in for this election with.
All right, you did mention earlier in your submission that there are a lot of interesting issues and controversies that came up within the course of since we spoke. Rather, there's been some issues that came up. You did mention something about the rotational issue. What other issues are we looking at now, and how do you think it will play out in the grand scheme of things? When we talk about the elections.
All right, another issue that is very pertinent to the voters is the issue of ecological problems in Anambra State. You know that Anambra State is one of those states in Nigeria that has a lot of environmental and ecological issues. Just recently, there was flooding in many parts of Anambra State. Even in areas where before now, there's never been flooding, or maybe let me say the flood level in these areas have never reached an alarming rate. But we are witnessing this year for the first time. For example, in the Nnewi local government where I live, there was a serious flooding, and these are issues, that also took, I think, about 2 lives between Nnewi and Nnobi. 2 lives were lost, just about within this week, earlier this week. So these disasters are also, of course, you would expect that the opposition parties are latching on it, blaming the failure of Governor Soludo's environmental policies and programs for this research flood. Then there are other minute issues, issues like certificates, issues that came up about the APC candidate and his deputy. You know that the APC candidate has a female deputy governorship candidate who is very popular, within her senatorial district. And of course, there were some altercations, before now between the governor and when he dismissed, some of the, or I say he tried to attack, and question the credentials of both the APC candidates and his deputy, somewhat portraying them as fraudulent individuals, who are not honest with themselves, and by the same token may not be honest with the promises they're making to Anambra by saying that some of them may have presented to INEC false certificates. So there are a lot of cocktails of issues. There were back and forths, including some very unprintable name calling, between the governor and these other candidates. But all in all, I think that the issues that in the Anambra, for example, myself and most people who are not carried away by those theatrics, the issues we are most concerned about the issues of, for example, as I've mentioned, like the ecological issues that affect the lives of people. And then, of course, Anambra State has also witnessed in very recent times a lot of peace, returning to communities, and so that will also count. For example, people for the past 2-3 years have not been able to go to some parts of access some part of Anambra State, Lilu axis in Ihiala side. So many axes in the Anambra South, were hijacked by what I would say, I would just call it outright terrorism. Internal and external terrorism. no matter how you look at it, because for villages to be sacked by for 3 years and onwards, it means that something is wrong with whatever anybody claims to put up as the reason why these things are happening. So the peace returning to and calm returning to these remote places, these communities that were once flourishing, as part of the contributory conversations that that in Anambra are having now. Some people are looking at it from the color lenses of politics. That why didn't this happen up until now? And why is the government looking all of a sudden like they are sitting up because they're facing a re-election? So these are the issues that the opposition parties are also, putting forward for Anambra to examine. But on the other hand, other people also believe that it has nothing to do with politics, but just that the results of the many policies that the government has of the day have rolled out are now paying off. Just that it coincides with the election season. Well, whatever it is, the most important thing to Anambra, who are very industrious people, is a peace and calm environment and enabling facilities to do their business, because we're highly very trade-driven people. So that's Anambra don't require so much from leadership apart from these basic things to be put in place.
Brilliant. Now, during his campaign, the incumbent governor, Professor Soludo, has actually did issue a directive, so sort of educational policy banning Christmas parties and graduation events. How does this really help with this campaign, and how are the people responding to this policy?
Well, I wouldn't hold brief for the government and on why they made that announcement. It was more like an announcement. Don't know if there's a law that promulgated it, but of course, I think that the idea, if I were to think deeply as to why they're making that announcement, it borders on the fact that so many parents recently, complain about the exhausting and crippling level of fees that are being requested, by schools, especially in some private schools, where some of the proprietors and owners of the school capitulate on graduation ceremonies to place a lot of levies on parents. And so for some of the parents whose children are in some of these schools and are affected, I believe that that may be the governor's announcement and proclamation, may be some relief to them. So what he banned was graduation ceremonies, for example, for nursery children, and for all these other classes, that are not marking an end to a particular level of education. For example, those in premises, of course, the graduation ban did not affect them, from the clarification, that I've read from the Ministry of Education here in Anambra State. But the excessive inclusion of classes that do not require a graduation ceremony, of course, effectively, that was banned by that proclamation. Another thing he raised in his declarations about the educational issues was the issue of textbooks. Writing in textbooks, like workbooks, textbooks, making the books not fit for subsequent children to use it. When children of the same parents can't use the books that their older siblings, used. So these are the issues that he brought to light, and some of them commendable, because when things are left unchecked, sometimes they're prone to abuse. But all in all, I don't think that is an issue that has gained any traction in regards to the fact to the voting population, because to some extent it grants relief to parents, and of course, parents, when you look at it, parents of younger students who are the target of that declaration are in the multitude, and for most of them it is a relief instead of something that should take away from the governor.
All right, so let's talk a bit about the ADC candidates' affidavits pledge, talking about Mr. Musu. Do you think that this move will play on the emotions of the electorate and probably sway them, and towards, the ADC, voting for the ADC? What effect do you think this particular move will have on the electorate, on the Anambra?
Okay, the when I saw the affidavits, I said, okay, it was probably born out of a conviction, by the candidates to try to stick, to the promise of serving for one term. I would have, like I mentioned earlier, I would have loved that affidavit to be accompanied by yet another more important affidavit, the affidavit that no Nigerian politician has ever contemplated, which is the affidavit that they would keep to the promises that they are making, during the campaigns, so that we can now have a very legitimate legal basis to commit them to prison if they do not keep those promises. But of course, I was not very satisfied that particular affidavit was not part of the affidavits that he sworn to. But for the one that he had done, I think it's new. We have always heard politicians say that they would do one term, but at least for the first time, at least in my own recollection, we're having a politician go to the court and depose this promise in the form of an affidavit. Well, the effects it will have on the people, I don't think that it would have much of an effect on the voting population, but of course, stakeholders in Anambra State, stakeholders in Anambra South may be convinced that the man is, genuine with his promise to serve one term. Because the problem is that it is the turn of Anambra Central after it is Anambra South. So most of the stakeholders in Anambra Central naturally would want for there not to be any change in the status quo. And so I think that affidavit was essentially, for those whose turn it would be after Anambra South completes with regards to the current arrangement, which is not bound by any law. I must mention that this current arrangement is entirely, a creation of the ruling of Progressive Grand Alliance, and it is not signed by most of the parties in Anambra State. But for whatever it is worth, that affidavit, if it is well presented, the only thing I think it could achieve is to suit the nerves of the political stakeholders in Anambra Central, whose turn it will be after Anambra South. But for the voters, I don't think that is one of the things that may count, in their decision, because of course, most of them may not even get to read that affidavit. And even if they read it, it doesn't tie to that's why I said that the most important one for the voters would have been an affidavit to keep up his promises. He has 7-point agenda that he has rolled out as what he wants to do for Anambra State. I would have loved to see an affidavit that if he fails on any count of the 7, that the law will take its course on him. That would have been better for the population, for the voting population.
All right, I'm sure you must have heard that Enugu State Governor Peter Mba is set to defect to the APC with an official ceremony coming up by the 14th, on Tuesday of October 2025. He's moving with, if you may, the structure of PDP into APC. How do you see this playing out in Anambra's, elections? Do you see any outcomes changing as regards to this defection? In any way, do you see any sort of correlation or relationship, just anything, that could affect the outcome of the elections in Anambra?
Well, I can see how that could be. Anambra and Enugu, neighboring states, similar in some regards, especially if you look at it from this angle that Enugu has, for since time immemorial, since the return of the democracy in 1999, been a PDP state. On the other hand, Anambra, just some few years shy, joined, left the PDP and became an APOGA state since 2003. So if you look at it, both states have some similarities in terms of the fact that they have been ruled for a very long time by one party. So if, in the light of this new development now, it just means, it just may be a wake-up call for the ruling of Progressive Grand Alliance, because Governor Soludo has never hidden his relationship with the President Tinubu. He said he's known him for a very long time, and that the relationship transcends politics. And so, if it will affect the election, would be the answer to that would be if Governor Mba is coming to Anambra to assist the candidates of the APC in his campaign. I don't know how much admiration the Anambra have for Governor Mba, but I'm very sure that he has, being a business person, he has a lot of friends. He should have a lot of friends in Anambra State. So if he pulls his weight, sure, that could sway 1 or 2 votes for the APC. But whether that would affect the overall outcome of the election is yet to be seen. But where I'm looking at is the fact that after the elections, whoever wins, we are now seeing that Governor Mba's defection would create a very simple, compelling narrative that's changing political platform after a person won an election would no longer be as stigmatized as it would look, because PDP being Enugu being a PDP state for the longest time, now changing to APC, Anambra being APGA for the longest time. Who knows? I just mentioned the relationship between the governor and the president. Who knows if we are now if we are standing at the throes of the end of the party called APGA in Nigeria, because Anambra State is the only foothold that they have in the country.
All right, so very quickly, in 2 minutes before we let you go, you do know, everybody knows that there's a new leadership of the INEC in the person of Professor Amupiton. Do you see his leadership, although it might be too early to ask, but how do you see his leadership, affect, the elections in Anambra, seeing that the change came just before the Anambra governorship polls? What are your thoughts?
Well, when I saw the announcement, I looked up the man. Amupiton is not somebody who is hidden. He's an academic don. He has the right qualifications as far as qualifications are concerned. He's a professor of constitutional law, of electoral law rather, not even constitutional, electoral law. So I think that he's qualified in every sense of it. But the only other issue is because with Nigeria's current configuration, he is perceived as a Yoruba man. A lot of people would expect him that naturally he will gravitate, as we have seen in the past 10 years since the coming on board of the APC, towards practices that people have always criticized, to say that government power has influence over the supposedly independent INEC. But it is his to write his own story. I mean, it is his, even if he's the brother of the president and he's qualified, it is his to write his own story. So Professor Amupiton would now write his story, just like every other past INEC chairman has done, written their story. But then the election for Anambra State is very close. I'm not expecting that he would have gotten very much in charge by time November 8th hits. Remember that INEC is an institution and has a lot of civil servants who are there. So I believe that his input in the election, if any, will be negligible, because it's just coming on board. INEC is not is a very big institution. I don't expect, no matter how smart he is, for him to be very settled down, for it to be very settled before the election. I expect that this will be more of a litmus test for him to sit back and, as a newly appointed person, and study, the electoral terrain of the institution which he has been assigned to head. But all in all, it is for him to write his own story. I believe he's qualified and fit for the position.
Thank you so much, Caleb Festus, for your time and your insights. Always a pleasure having a conversation with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Nigerians, for listening.
All right. New Day continues after now with interesting and quality conversations. Do stay with us.